Y'all have already witnessed the best exchange stage panel of the entire fair. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. I spent some time. My name is Juan Alonso. I'm the Chief Banking Officer for the East Region of Northern Trust, and it's really just welcoming you. I know you've probably been here since yesterday to the Chicago, our expo, the art fair, and as I was one to say, is the International Exposition of Contemporary and Modern Art. Northern Trust has been serving since 2013 as a presenting sponsor, and we're so proud to do it again this year. Today, I'm delighted to welcome you to a session that when I was told about it, I got very intrigued, which is practices in self-taught art and what it means and what the implications are. And we're doing this in partnership with Heritage Auctions. The conversation will focus on best practices on collecting with self-taught, outsider, or vernacular art. The other part about it is how Chicago is just a central place for this within the country, actually within the world. And what are some of the practices, the best practices, and what's trending in collecting self-taught art at both the institutional and at the personal level? Today, so here's our panelists. There's Rudy Aronoff. He is Vice President of Heritage Auctions in the Chicago office. Ashley Duchossois, Joyce. She is a collector of self-taught art, and we actually had a quick conversation before this, and I was intrigued just by hearing how she got started in it. Deb Kerr, who is the President and CEO of Intuit, which is a center for intuitive and outsider art here in Chicago, and David Welega, also a collector of self-taught art. And he's got the fans, so if y'all want to start a wave, that's fine too. Okay. But our panelist is Annalise Flynn, and she is an independent curator, and she is sitting next to me, and I'll be turning it over to her. Plus, but just want y'all to know, I was told to tell you that it is going to be recorded, the session, for archival purposes. And please, your audience participation, your questions, they're all going to be very welcomed at the end. And I may just get up and start asking questions because this subject really intrigues me. So, Annalise, let me turn it over to you.
Great. All right. Thank you so much, Juan. Feel free to jump up here and ask questions whenever you feel like it. Thank you so much to all the panelists, you guys, for joining us here today. Thanks to the Expo team for facilitating this really great slate of programming. And thanks to all of you. This is a really wonderfully full room, and it's so exciting to see all of you here. So thanks for being here. It's really exciting to have this conversation about self-taught artists at Expo and here in Chicago. The reason that I am in this field is because of the graduate work that I did at SAIC, the scholarship that I had access to, the resources like the Roger Brown Study Collection. And Chicago is known as a city that has really wrapped its arms around the work of self-taught artists for a long time. And so to get us started, I thought, Deb, you could tell us a little bit more about that history and then also how that led to the establishment of Intuit.
Sure, I'd love to. Well, to reach back in time a little bit, there's a nice connection with the French artist Jean Dubuffet, and we know, many of us know the sculpture in front of the State of Illinois building that's going to be moving over to the Art Institute. That's Jean Dubuffet, French artist, and he found that art made by untrained creators was what he considered to be the most pure form of art. So he was an early proponent of kind of naming this as a field. He called it art brut in French, raw art. And he came to the United States to try and get people enthused about this in the early 50s, and nothing in New York, just silence. But he came to the Art Institute of Chicago in 1951 and gave a talk called Anti-Cultural Positions. And the Arts Club of Chicago had already done a Horace Pippin exhibition, another self-taught artist. There was a lot of embracing of this idea already here in Chicago. And there were a number of artists. I'm always asked when I'm out and about, why were there so many self-taught what's known as outsider artists in Chicago, and I say because people in Chicago were paying attention. The collectors and the gallerists were noticing and promoting these artists. In '82, the Black Folk Art in America show from the Corcoran came to Chicago, was at the Field Museum, not at the Art Institute or the MCA, and more people got interested and noticed this art. So this was an early center of this work, and we are recognized as a city that really embraced this work around the world. So it was some early collectors that came together and founded Intuit. So the reason Intuit, this art museum dedicated to what has been called outsider art, is here is because of that embracing of this work. I did mention the word outsider, Annalise, so I'll just tackle it right now. The term is incredibly controversial. It's been around and has been the term of art, if you will, for many years. I would say that collectors and gallerists have very much embraced the term, but I will also say that younger audiences and academics have more rejected the term. We haven't found a better term, but if you hear vernacular, visionary, art brut, some kinds of folk art, it all sort of falls under this umbrella, and we're still wrestling with the term.
We'll take a poll at the end, and you guys can tell us.
Do we have to?
Well, thank you so much for adding some context to the conversation. That's super helpful. So I wanted to turn it over to the collectors. If you guys could tell us a little bit about your collections, how you got started. Was there a first artist that drew you to the work of self-taught artists, a kind of material use? Like, what got your foot in the door with this work?
Sure. Can you all hear me? I would like to say that this was kind of a family affair, my mother and I. Back when the House of Blues had a lot of folk art, I think my parents, maybe when I was in college, gave me a replica of one of the of pieces in, that was a folk art. And I, from there, got really excited. And then my mom and father, they collect contemporary art. So I'm a therapist by trade. So to me, when I started to see that this whole world of people that have never been taught, a lot of them were mentally ill, homeless, and they just had these visions or dreams, and some of the pieces of work were incredible. So I got really interested, and I would say my first Carl Hammer in Chicago. Really what piqued my interest was the whole story around Henry Darger, or Darger. A lot of people question that too. And so it was when Carl, so it's a gallery here in Chicago, and he had the exclusive rights to Henry Darger, and my mom and I were able to view it the day before it went to the public. So one of my first pieces ever was one of his pieces, and the story behind it and where they found it in a Lincoln Park apartment. I could go on and on. His room, actually, there's a replica at the Intuit. So that kind of, I like the story behind a lot of them.
That's great. So my story, my origination story, January 1998, I was here in Chicago. I recently moved to Columbus, Ohio, having lived here for about 20 years. And I went with a friend to the Judy Saslow Gallery. It was a freezing cold day. It was like 10 degrees. Everyone was staying home. It was very cold. There was no one on the street. And we went into the gallery, and I had never really seen this sort of work before. My parents took me to museums, and I always loved going to museums and looking at art, but I had never seen this type of art before. And at the time, I was just finishing up my interventional pain medicine fellowship. I'm a physician and treat patients with chronic and cancer-related pain. And I was just so intrigued by the emotion that was expressed and communicated through this work that I saw. And it happened to be work from a artist collective called La Tenaya in Florence. And so I was just so intrigued, like, what is this intersection between mental illness and struggle and making this beautiful work? And I remember buying that first work. It was $750, and I was a poor fellow at that time. And I think I paid it on time over a 6 to 12 month period of time. $750, it's like shoe money now. Not to sound like a snob, but I mean, the price point has changed as I have aged. But the collection grew from there. And one of the messages I wanted to share with the group, and thank you all for coming, is that we're calling it outsider art, but it is art. These are artists. They are either called by their obsessive thoughts or their religious convictions or just this inner drive to create. And from that is this intense emotion. And I don't really like to differentiate that from any other artist who has the need to communicate these ideas about the world or their thoughts or about how we communicate with one another. So that's my origination story.
Great, thank you. And just to stay on this thread for a second, I was able to watch a tour of your collection, and I really admired the way that you curated your space in terms of the way that you arranged work by self-taught artists, work by contemporary artists. All these pieces were very much in communication with each other, which I thought was really interesting. And I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about that and the philosophy you have.
Sure. So I'm 56. I've been collecting since that day in 1998. Recently, as I said, moved to a bigger home so I can get almost everything out of storage and put it up. One of the wonderful things, and you as collectors or interested parties or adjacent to collectors know that one of the most exciting things about being a collector is the dialogues that you can create with work. So we haven't ghettoized like all of the outsider artists into the living room and then all the contemporary artists are over here. There's an interaction there. So the things that really interest me are language, the use of script as art, materiality, the artist's hand, the presence of the artist's hand. And again, I like to juxtapose a work by someone like Glenn Ligon, who's all about text, with someone like, Dan Miller, who, had his own sort of script that was just sort of scribbling, or J.B. Murray, or someone like this. Of course, collectors collect more than they can present, and so we have the opportunity to shift things around and move and create little exhibitions in our own home.
Thank you. So to zoom out a little bit, Rudy, I'd love it if you could tell us a little bit about the market for this work and how you work with collectors to grow their collections.
So this market is ever expanding. I feel like we're always coming across new self-taught artists. That's my preferred term to use, self-taught. The market really took off, the secondary market really took off. The dealer and primary market has been robust for many years, probably starting in the 80s in Chicago, and then moving to New York and LA as well. In 2018, the Met had an amazing exhibition of outsider and self-taught art. And right after that, at the beginning of the pandemic, Christie's had a handful of sales that saw auction records and prices jump, even for some artists beyond the primary or dealer market. So when we're working with collectors, either buying or selling, we look at the best venue for purchase or sale, whether that is auction or through dealers and private treaty sales. And the best advice we give is buy what you love and what you want to live with. So.
Great, thanks. Well, you touched on this a little bit in terms of like how the market has changed over time, but I'd love to hear what you all think. I mean, all of you, about the way that reception to this kind of work has changed over the course of your collecting, over the course of the, leading the institution Intuit. How have responses to this work changed?
Well, maybe I'll start. I think that when Intuit was first founded, the goal of the organization, its mission, was to really introduce a broader audience to this art. The popularity of this work has exploded, as Rudy mentioned. And I think that there are still, though, people discovering the work. There are still people discovering that the museum exists here in Chicago. And one of the things I found really interesting is since COVID, our on-site audience at the museum has been about 65% of our audience are people 18 to 35. So young people are discovering the work. I think early on, the work was often collected by people who didn't have wealth. This was seen as an accessible area of art where you could collect with $750. And now I think that the most popular artists, the prices are, as Rudy hinted, extremely high, but there are still emerging artists. There's still work that can be accessible, but I think there are also people who just want to come and see the work, and that's one of the reasons the museum is currently being renovated and expanded, because of the popularity of the work and the desire for audiences to spend more time with this work, whether they can afford to have it in their home or not.
Anybody else? Thoughts?
I think an important aspect of the outsider art world and community, the stories are so incredibly interesting. If you were privileged enough to end up at Yale and get an MFA in sculpture, your future is looking pretty bright. You might have a couple of hiccups, but the future is looking pretty bright. We're talking about people with undiagnosed schizophrenia, polysubstance abuse, substance use disorders, homeless, no advantages, and they are able to find materials. One of the interesting things about outsider art is you're not seeing stretched canvas with gesso in a beautiful frame. It's found paper. I mean, Susan King, who is a autistic, she's an artist who happens to be autistic in New Zealand. She preferred using imperfect papers to create her work. James Castle, another huge name in the outsider art field, used, he was deaf and mute living in Idaho in the 1950s, 60s, 70s. He used found paper like the back of labels of canned vegetables or matchbooks or the papers that are used to fold up your dry cleaning. And he used that along with ash and spit and writing or drawing implements that he whittled by hand. So again, for me, the artist's hand in the work, very interesting, but also the materiality is so interesting, and it's making beautiful, thoughtful objects that we talk about and can dialogue about, and it comes from nothing. It comes from nothing except the creative spirit, which I think is so beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful intersection between the experience of the artist, the incredible, beautiful art that they create, and what we can relate to when we see that art and when we learn the artist's story.
Yeah, absolutely. So, David, you were talking a little bit about the background of some of the artists that you have collected or interacted with. And so I'm wondering, for you and for Ashley, do you have any favorite artists? Do you have any favorite pieces? Do you have any favorite anecdotes about the one that got away or something on your radar?
Honestly, I have to say, as a collector, to me, every piece I love. And I love just being able to walk around my house and different rooms and see the art, which again is, earlier I was just saying that, when it is some of the artists, my kids will be like, Mom, like, I could draw better than that. Like, what in the world? Why are we having, and some of them, I actually have some of my kids' pieces up with some artists, and you really cannot tell the difference. And I love theirs as much. But so I don't know if I have a favorite one. Again, going back to a lot of the artists that I love, it's because of their story. It's how they were discovered. And honestly, every single person has a great story behind it. The one that got away, I would say, is again going back to that day that I bought a Henry Darger, and it was the most expensive piece ever that I was purchasing, which is now probably 1,000 times greater nowadays in today's market. But there was this beautiful individual piece. It was like a self-portrait of a Vivian girl. If you know anything about Henry Darger, he had this fantasy of kind of a made-up fantasy of this world, and so it was just a really cool one picture. And it was like, let's say $750 over my budget, and I went home. I sat on it, I came back the next day, and it was gone. And so that was maybe 30 years ago, and I'm still looking for that piece. If any of you guys know of that piece, please call me.
Yeah, and that obsessiveness, that compulsion to continue, like, all right, every wall in every room is full, but you still have this desire to support artists, be engaged with beautiful things, be surrounded by beautiful things, create these new conversations or dialogues between works. The ones that got away, I mean, I don't have children, so I don't have to, the art budget it is a little bigger than it would be if I had children that were, in a private school. So there are some things that got away, but I just kind of keep amassing.
Great, good for you. I love that. Yeah. And then for people who are thinking about creating their own collections, diving into this genre of work themselves, what advice would you give? Rudy, we'll start with you.
So for new collectors, knowledge is power. Knowledge about the art, the artists, the market. Spend time with dealers. Spend time at galleries. Spend time with other collectors. Galleries, dealers, that's how you will meet the other collectors. And like I said earlier, you have to buy what you love and buy the best thing in your budget that you can buy, or what you think is the best thing in your budget. Auction, a lot of times you can get, I don't want to say deals, but the market's different. Sometimes things get placed at small regional houses and they go unnoticed. But you do have to be careful. Vetting processes at smaller regional houses might not be as good, and I don't think we have time to go into authenticity concerns in outsider and self-taught art in this panel, but that is something to be concerned about.
I would just add, I would just agree with you. I think to me it is go to different art galleries and talk to the dealers. To me, we've become very friendly with a handful of gallery owners, and getting kind of the inside scoop, I think, is really kind of made me want to find out more. I would agree with you with the auction. There, in my opinion, there's been some, and again, I don't think it should matter about the price, but a lot of times if you go to either a live auction, which is really fun to be at, or calling in, a lot of the ones that are placed at the very end at like number 199 or 250, people have already left, I feel like. So, I have seen some incredible pieces that from well-known individuals that that have just been somehow placed in the back, and people are able to get it for a lot less than it's worth. If you're looking at it for an investment, but I think a lot of people, again, depending on how you want to collect, is it an investment or is it a passion?
I think always collect passionately, even if it isn't an investment. And one thing Ashley touched on, dealers and collectors want to talk about their collection and the art that they are representing always. And that is how you're going to get the down low on everything. So if you are looking to start out, or you're a seasoned collector but you're moving into a new collecting area, I think just mix and mingle, chat with people. Their stories are as interesting as the artists sometimes.
Well, it feels like you teed me up for a little plug. Thank you. Go to the
Anytime.
Yeah, you can also go to museums and see this work. And one of the things that we do that's wildly popular with our members, because we have members, because there are not that many museums that focus exclusively on this art, we have members all over the country and around the world, and we do a tour of a member's home every other month. We do a live Zoom to talk to that member, that collector, and this is one of our most popular things with our members, because they can get that peek into Ashley's home or into David's home and see what they're collecting, and see how David hangs that self-taught work alongside other contemporary artists, and they can learn those stories. Everyone who owns art is really passionate about telling you the stories of how they got this incredible piece, and you both have beautiful homes with beautiful collections, and that's just one more way. And I did bring membership forms just in case.
I love that. So one word of advice that I would say is don't mix your dopamine. You get a dopamine surge from learning about an artist, seeing something beautiful. I love this audience interaction. I feel like there's a story here. Because I know what dopamine is. Yeah. So it's a neurotransmitter that's innately in your body, but if you're on MDMA or other drugs, you get a lot of it. But some people get the drug feel from going to an auction and acquiring something, and they're so excited about getting this thing that they don't realize that they've gone way over their budget. So if you're an early collector, read first, talk to people first, don't get crazy. But also when you see something that truly moves you, and people in the room probably know what I'm talking about, it's like that feeling of like, oh my God, this touches me, not as an investment for a portfolio, and don't, unless you're buying a certain 1% of the art market, period, you're not buying as an investment. Buy because you are supporting living artists. Buy because you want to be around something beautiful that touches you and makes you think a little harder. Second phrase of advice is get uncomfortable, or get comfortable with what looks uncomfortable to you. I remember maybe 15 years ago, I walked into Corbett and Dempsey, and I thought I knew what I was doing, but I walked into a show by Joyce Pensato, who's not an outsider artist, but some of her work is very outsidery. It's very expressive. It's very physical. It's very emotional. It's very raw. And so I walked into this space, and there's black house paint thrown everywhere, and I didn't get it. But I kept thinking about it. And I went back again. And what was making me feel uncomfortable was something that I needed to tap into and kind of explore, and hate to say it, lean into, overused, but ask questions. Explore what you are feeling when you are looking at work. And sometimes that means you can't be at a vernissage where everyone's having cocktails and talking, and over the din of conversation, you can't even concentrate on the work in front of you. Spend quiet time in a museum. Go to galleries on a Tuesday or Wednesday when it's not the weekend. Come to Intuit. Deb is going to be there, and she will do a personalized tour for you, with you. You will feel like the most special person in the world, and you'll learn a lot. Also, there was, other than the big show that Rudy mentioned, there was a big Bill Traylor exhibition at the Smithsonian a few years ago. There's a beautiful hard copy art book, looks wonderful on your coffee table, and in between Netflix episodes you can look at work and read a couple of paragraphs and learn a little bit more. But keep looking and keep your heart open.
In the museum vein, a lot of our clients, people we work with at Heritage, contemporaries of Ashley and David, have done a really good job with donating important pieces from their collection to lots of museums, the Smithsonian, the Met, the Perez, the Rubel. All of these collections have huge amounts of outsider art, self-taught art that's on display. So it's out there. You just have to find it.
Intuit's entire collection has been donated to us. We're doing our first commission right now, thanks to our Young Professionals Board, and we also have artwork donated to the museum for our fundraising auctions. So keep an eye on our website, because there's another way to find some low-priced,
Low-hanging fruit.
Yes, low-priced work that's really phenomenal.
Don't downplay it.
Yeah,
Accessible.
No,
Accessible.
it's phenomenal work.
All I was going to say is, when you talk about outsider art and how I think it has really it's grown a lot in interest, and I think it is because there are shows that are in major museums. So, like the Smithsonian, and I think that which was an incredible show, but I think when you have people that are donating to major museums as well, that turns into people getting more and more excited about it. There's been incredible write-ups about different artists, so it's exploded.
And I think when these artists' work end up in these museums and there are these big write-ups, the attention goes back to younger people who are starting to learn about it in school. When I was in school, we certainly didn't have a topic or even a class or a seminar devoted to self-taught art. So I think it's wonderful.
Well, we are doing that in the Chicago Public Schools. But Ashley, you also reminded me that a number of these incredible artists, like Bill Traylor, have had films made about them. There's an incredible documentary, Bill Traylor Chasing Ghosts, that was done at the same time as that exhibition. So if you want to learn more about the artists, you can find documentaries about many of these artists. And that's another way you can learn about them, hear about their stories, and become more deeply steeped in them.
Yeah, thanks. Just to piggyback on that, there are a lot of institutions that are doing really incredible curatorial work and research around artists, on self-taught artists and artist-built environments as well. I live in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, which is where the John Michael Kohler Art Center is and the Art Preserve. If anyone is interested in exploring more about this work, go to Intuit first, and then
not this week.
Not this week.
Go to Sheboygan first.
Okay, go to Sheboygan first.
Until we get the museum.
I'm driving back there today, so you can hitch a ride with me and go to the Art Preserve and see their incredible collection. I mean, it's really stunning and amazing.
We'll be reopening in early 25.
So definitely go to Sheboygan first, and then back here in 2025. So one of the things that has sort of struck me through this conversation is sort of the consistent return to this idea of collecting what you love, finding things that you want to live with, finding work that moves you. And so I'm just curious, for anybody here, is there a piece or an artist that they feel particularly moved by that they want to talk about or share a story about?
Okay, so Ronald Lockett. Who in the room has heard this name before? Okay. Hello. So Ronald Lockett, he I think is kind of hot right now. His work is in the Met. Several other big collections. He hasn't reached that six-figure price point yet. But I think his story is very interesting because there's so much about his backstory that's really interesting. So this is, he was not by blood, but he was the nephew of Thornton Dial. Not by blood, but basically Thornton Dial raised him and taught him how to paint. And when you look at Thornton Dial's work, you see American racism and our journey, and not everything is cheery and sunny. But Ronald, had Mr. Dial as his mentor and created in a different vein, and has this incredible symbolism and used found objects, pieces of a barn that he was raised around, and house paint, very humble materials. But the power of this work is just incredible when you are with it and you hear the backstory. So he was an African-American man living in Alabama, didn't really have great opportunity. He was in sort of a town that had been abandoned by industry, didn't have a lot of opportunities, ended up dying of AIDS at a very young age. I think he was in his 30s, but made incredible work then. And it just moves me every time I look at it. Again, making beauty, and it's not, it's dark beauty, but it's extremely thought-provoking. And again, I call it making chicken salad out of chicken droppings. Using other words, as I'm holding a mic in front of people, I don't want to swear, but creating incredible, thoughtful, beautiful work out of nothing in great adversity and still communicating a truth. It's just incredibly powerful to me every time that I see an artist's work like that. And a great touchstone for me is being able to support living artists, after that long story about someone who died, supporting living artists, particularly. You have no idea what sort of esteem boost is created when you meet an artist who has made work, who has been doing this out of obsession, compulsion, need, messaging from their greater power. And you buy the work and you express your love for it, your interest in it, your attachment to it. It's incredible. It's just helping another human being, which is another way that being a collector can be a really great thing.
As you were talking, I was trying to go through my pieces. It's really hard, but I will. I'll say two. When you talked about living and not living, I went. There is an artist who works. There's a lot of small galleries, or I don't know if they're galleries or institutions or art classes where people with special needs will go, and they will have that any type of material and create. And there is an artist named Nicole Apple, based out of a gallery in New York. And I went to the Outsider Art Fair probably 8 years ago, and there was this collection that that she did, and each piece, I would say it's maybe 12 by 24 or 2 feet by 3 feet. They're intricate, and in each one is a different story. So, for example, I would say, like, one I have, it's all different. She's obsessed with weather, so it's all different paintings of weather maps and weather, everything that you'd see on the news. She's nonverbal, And she, I ended up buying 5 pieces. They were really inexpensive, and I was in love. There was a whole thing of different clowns, and she has an iPad, and it takes her almost 3 months to do one little square. So it takes her an incredible amount of time. And as my husband and I were looking, and I bought it, the woman next to me, she goes, "Oh my gosh, you're gonna buy those?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "That's my sister." And this is the first time that, so she was just at the show. She had left by the time, so I have not met her, but that's displayed somewhere else, and not at my main home, but I love it. And the value has not, it's, again, very, very reasonable, but to me, knowing her story, meeting her sister, and knowing that she has a place where she's able to express herself, as just makes me really happy.
What's the name of the
one.
gallery?
What?
What's the name of the New York gallery?
I think it's Land Gallery. Yes, Land Gallery. Yes, she's awesome.
Either of you two, artists, pieces that you've come across, you've experienced, that have really moved you in a significant way?
The Philadelphia Wiremen. I don't know. I'm sure you two are familiar. Really intriguing to me, mostly because the works are small bundles of wire and detritus, bottle caps, cigarette butts, pretty much anything you can think of. And to the best of my knowledge, no one knows who the artist was. These were found in an alley in Philadelphia, and I think in the 80s. Is that right? 90s? 80s, 90s. And they blow me away every time I see them. And they're tiny. They're like, no more than, I think the biggest one I've ever seen was maybe 8 inches. They're just really, really interesting. It's who did this? Why? What were they going through? It makes my mind wander every time.
I'm going to go with the granddaddy. I'm going to go with Henry Darger. He's our guy. We have his room, and we've spent an incredible amount of time with scholars learning about him. I think most of you probably know who he is, but he was born in 1892. He was orphaned as a young child and eventually sent to a place that was called the Asylum for Feeble-Minded Children in downstate Lincoln, Illinois, a place that was kind of the poster child for what not to do in an institution with children, where there was corporal punishment and other terrible things likely happened. He escaped, comes back to Chicago, lives his life as a janitor, and upon his death, his landlords discover that he's written a 15,000-page novel, this fantasy story, Tolkien-esque good versus evil story of the 7 Vivian girls, and they amass armies like Joan of Arc to defeat the evil Glendolinians who are holding children as slaves and torturing them. And the images, some of them are just so incredibly beautiful, with flowers and children and the magical Blingan creatures with their wings and their dragon tails, and some of them have little, cute little faces, little bitty horns, and some of them have big scary faces and giant bighorn sheep horns, and some of them are really horrific images of children being tortured. One of the most controversial things about these works is that oftentimes the children many of the children appear to be female, but when they're in battle or in danger, they're, as Henry said, denuded, and they have male genitalia. And some of our scholars that have done work on these, Henry lifted entire portions from popular books of the day, Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Wizard of Oz books, Alice in Wonderland, and just replaced the words with, replaced the names of the protagonists with his own characters' names, and made the adjectives a little scarier. And in the second Oz book, Tip is the protagonist, and Tip has escapes from an evil sorceress, and he has adventures with the 10 Men and the Scarecrow. And at the end of the book, Glinda the Good Witch comes to him and says, Tip, you're actually under an evil spell. You're Princess Ozma, and you need to be turned back into a girl and lead Oz and be its leader again. So there's just one reference to gender transformation. Another is that Henry was a devout Catholic, and there is a 4th century saint worshipped in the daily mass, Saint Vivia Perpetua. And the night before she died in the 4th century, she dreamed that she had been dragged into the Colosseum to face her death, and the soldiers pulled her clothes away, and she looked down, and she had become a man, and she was ready to do battle. So there are stories of gender transformation that Henry would have been aware of. And I think that we continue to learn about him, and we're going to be telling more of these stories about him. But the art itself is so spectacular. And one of my favorites is actually belongs to Judy Saslow. It's a Blengen, and it's got a red cat head. So the magical creature with the wings and everything has a red cat head. And at the bottom, Henry describes where she's from, the St. Catherine Islands, which we actually have the map of the St. Catherine Islands in our collection. But he wrote, "Ain't she kittenish?"
Great story.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, thank you. So before we turn it over to audience questions, one thing I'm curious about, and Ashley, you kind of mentioned this, a new artist that you're looking at, a new gallery that you just were visiting at the Outsider Art Fair. Who is everyone looking at now and excited about now? Institutions, galleries, artists. What's coming up next for y'all?
Honestly, I don't know if I could pinpoint what is coming up next. I am just constantly going back to the individuals, the gallery owners, the auctions, and just doing my own research and seeing what grabs me. So I don't know where I'm going to go next with my collection.
You mentioned the progressive studios, where artists who are working who live with mental illness or developmental disabilities. We are so blessed. We have several of those here in Chicago. The granddaddy of them all is Creative Growth in Oakland, California. The works of these artists are just spectacular, and you can go and see those works. Go to Arts of Life or Project Onward or any other of these mini studios and check out those works. They're very affordable, and you get to meet the artists and have those same kinds of magical experiences that you described, Ashley.
And Arts of Life has a booth here, and it's actually right at the bottom of the stairs. So if you feel inclined and inspired after this panel, you can go straight there.
They actually have an online auction right now because their benefit's coming up in a few weeks. So you can support the organization and pick up some interesting, beautiful work as well.
Any thoughts from either of you two about
what's next?
What's next, or like, how are you? What's next for your
I
collection?
march to the beat of my own drummer at this point. I just go. I'm just living life every day. Every day is a new day. I'm just kind of doing my own thing and just trying to see as much as I can, travel when I can, look at art. No destination of like, oh, I gotta have this one. I do try to follow what Roberta Smith says. So she's a writer for the New York Times, and she's been a huge proponent of art made by outsiders for decades. She's probably one of the biggest and loudest cheerleaders, and really, I think she leads the charge in leveling the playing field of like what art is and what it's expressing. And then her husband, Jerry Saltz, also is a big fan of outsider artists like Melvin Way, who just passed away a couple of months ago, I believe. So, my recommendation, just keep looking. Just keep looking.
If you had fun here at Expo, there are also fairs to go to. The big one is the Outsider Art Fair in New York in March, but there's a little one over in Harbor, Michigan, over Labor Day weekend called the Outsiders Outside, and it's a mix of vintage and stuff and some artists and self-taught artists, but that's an easy way to take a look and start to feel and have an adventure at the same time. Yeah, Rudy?
I think go to auction houses, go to galleries. Auction houses are great because you never know what's coming next. Just keep reading, keep looking. Roberta Smith wrote the write-up on the Met Show in 2018, right? Yeah. Big proponent of outsider and self-taught art.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Well, I think we have a couple minutes for questions. Just ask if you have a question to keep.